We lost the Endurance, our ship crushed by the relentless ice. But there was no time for despair. Our only hope? An 800-mile journey across the wildest ocean in a tiny lifeboat. The sea was unforgiving, the cold relentless. I knew if we didn't reach South Georgia in a month, it was over. With 6 men and 1 frail boat, we faced towering waves, freezing winds, and a race against time. The odds were impossible, but failure meant death for us, and the men we left behind. The decision was clear. We had to sail for help. Port Stanley was closer, but the headwinds would likely defeat us. South Georgia was 800 miles away, but the westerly winds offered a better chance. Our lifeboat, the James Caird, would need reinforcing to handle the brutal seas. Despite the obvious risks, I knew this was our only option. Worsley, Wild, and I assessed the James Caird. The boat seemed even smaller than I remembered, its frame strained from our previous ordeal. Our carpenter, old but experienced, was eager to help strengthen it. He installed supports and began preparing for the journey despite the raging blizzard. On April 21st, the weather briefly cleared. We set to work, gathering materials for decking and reinforcing the keel. The storm intensified again the next morning, halting progress, but our spirits held. The icebergs loomed on the horizon, a constant reminder of the treacherous path ahead. We set sail, navigating through ice floes as the James Caird cut through the waves. The sub-Antarctic waters lived up to their deadly reputation. I decided to head north initially, hoping to reach warmer weather before turning east towards South Georgia. For 16 grueling days, we battled towering waves and freezing winds, taking shifts at the tiller, while the others huddled in soaked sleeping bags. Finally, we sighted the cliffs of South Georgia. The coast was lined with jagged rocks and swirling waves. We searched for a landing spot, but it was treacherous. My feet, numb from the cold, barely held firm on the slick rocks as we struggled to secure the boat in the darkness. Losing the James Caird here would have spelled disaster, but luck held, and we found shelter in a small cove. We made camp in a recess of the cliffs at King Haakon Bay. The cave was rudimentary, but we managed to strew the floor with tussock grass for some comfort. Icicles hung in front of the cave, shielding us from the wind. It was basic but dry. We lit a fire, cooked and rested. This was our base, dubbed Peggotty Camp. For the next stage of our journey, the terrain was daunting. Steep mountain ranges and glaciers barred our way inland. We planned to sail further up the sound, aiming for the head of the bay. Here, we encountered sea elephants, which provided us with much-needed food and fuel. We insulated the James Caird with turf and settled in, our spirits lifted by the temporary respite. Our route would take us around a glacier on the east side, then up a snow-covered slope through a pass in the Allardyce Range. The landscape was mostly ice, punctuated by ridges and peaks. From our camp, we saw 2 possible routes, but opted for the eastern one, aiming for Stromness Bay, where we hoped to find help. We roped ourselves together as we ascended, wary of crevasses. The snow was soft, slowing our progress. We climbed to an elevation of 2,500 feet before the weather turned foggy. In the dense mist, we could barely see our path, so we guided each other by calling out directions. For hours we trudged on, exhausted but determined. As dawn broke, the fog lifted. From a ridge we looked down, expecting to see a frozen lake, but instead saw the open sea, a shocking realization. We had misjudged our position. We had to backtrack up the glacier, losing precious time. By mid-morning, we regained our lost ground and resumed our southeast course. We reached the top of the pass, the moonlight illuminating a landscape of jagged peaks and descending glaciers. The eastern waters of South Georgia were visible, but impassable cliffs and glaciers lined the coast. We pressed on, knowing that just beyond these barriers lay the whaling stations and our chance of rescue. Descending the final slope, we encountered worsening snow conditions, sinking deeper with every step. The ridges ahead seemed insurmountable, but we pushed forward. We navigated past a creaking glacier, its constant calving a reminder of the unstable environment. The remnants of shipwrecks littered the shore, a silent testament to the dangers of these waters. We traversed the last stretch in daylight, the weather mercifully clear. The final obstacle was a wide snowfield. It was slow going, but we pressed on, knowing that Stromness was close. By nightfall, we descended into the valley leading to the whaling station. At last, we saw the buildings of Stromness Bay, houses with electric lights shining in the distance. The sight filled us with relief and hope. We had made it. News of our survival would soon spread, and the rescue mission for the men left on Elephant Island could finally begin. Exhausted but triumphant, we stumbled into the station, the end of our harrowing journey in sight. The impossible voyage had succeeded. Now it was time to save the others.